Let's face it, financial stress is exhausting. When every bill feels like a threat and constant price rises make your chest tighten, it's hard to think about anything else, let alone self-care. If you're worried about money and feeling sick about the rising cost of living, this episode is for you. I'm going to walk you through what financial anxiety does to your brain, why tips like just budget better don't actually fix anything, and practical ways to feel more in control of money stress, including a simple weekly reset that I use. We have a lot to discuss, so let's talk about money stress. Hello and welcome back to Let's Talk About Mental Health. I'm Jeremy Godwin, and this show is all about practical mental health advice for real life. This week, we're talking about how expensive everything is these days and how much stress that causes. So let's just get this out on the table, shall we? The constant drain of everything costing more and more from one week to the next makes life feel heavier. When you're already juggling work stuff, family stuff, your own brain being a bit of a handful, adding on stuff like, how am I going to afford this on top of all of that, can quite often end up being the thing that pushes you from, I'm just about coping, into, I honestly don't know how much more of this I can take. So today we're going to talk about it and what to do so that your head doesn't explode. Now, just to be clear, I am not a finance guru. There's plenty of content out there about how to budget if you need it. But today I'm talking to you from your nervous system is completely fried and you're barely holding it together type of perspective. Because yes, money is something practical that we all need to deal with, but it's also deeply emotional. It's about safety, options, identity, and whether or not you feel like you have any control over your life. Many of us are dealing with constant rising costs, wages that don't keep up, rent or mortgage stress, and that constant background noise of what if something big breaks or goes wrong. And for a lot of people, the usual advice of, well, you should just budget better, either isn't realistic or it just doesn't actually help you when you're lying awake at 3 a.m. thinking about worst case scenarios or having a mild freakout in the supermarket when you see the price of coffee these days. And just to say it clearly, therapy and professional help are really important. And if you have access to that, please use it. But I also know a lot of you either can't get support right now or are using this show as something to lean on between sessions. So I want you to think of this episode as a set of practical tools that you can start using straight away to support yourself while you keep doing whatever you need to do on the financial side of things. All right, so let's talk about what is financial stress. So by financial stress, I'm not just talking about being a little bit worried about money. I'm talking about that ongoing sense of dread or tension around your finances, the one that sits in the back of your mind either all or most of the time. It's the constant mental pressure that makes it hard to relax, hard to think straight, and hard to feel safe. Even if, on paper, things might look okay. The financial anxiety is what happens when money moves from being a practical problem that you need to solve into feeling like a threat your brain is constantly scanning for, like when the price of everything keeps going up and up and up. Financial stress and anxiety usually shows up as a mix of thoughts, emotions, and physical reactions. Mentally, it might be endless what-if thoughts, or catastrophizing about the future, or replaying numbers in your head, or feeling like you're always one step away from financial disaster. Emotionally, it might look like shame, guilt, anger, or embarrassment, especially if you feel like you should have it all together by now. Physically, it can be things like a tight chest, headaches, poor sleep, churning stomach, or feeling wired and exhausted at the same time. It can push you into two extreme patterns: obsessing or avoiding. Obsessing might look like checking your banking app multiple times a day, constantly refreshing your email for bills, or endlessly researching money tips without actually changing anything. Avoiding, on the other hand, might look like things like not opening letters, ignoring emails, not logging into your banking accounts, or just pretending everything is fine until something urgent forces you to deal with it. You might bounce around between the two. Maybe you have a burst of panic action and then a long stretch of avoidance because it all just becomes way too much to deal with. Now, for a lot of people who feel like they're barely holding it together, financial anxiety also shows up as decision fatigue. Simple choices all of a sudden can just feel loaded. Choices like what to buy at the supermarket, whether or not to renew a particular subscription, or whether or not you're going to say yes to a coffee out. All of that stuff can feel really overwhelming. You might notice a running commentary in your head of things like, can I really justify this? What if something breaks? What if I need that money later? It's exhausting, and over time, it chips away at your mood, your energy, and your sense of control. So when I say financial anxiety in this episode, I'm talking about that ongoing state where money worries are living rent-free in your mind and body, while you're trying to figure out how to pay the actual rent yourself. It's not just about how much you earn or how much you spend. It's about how unsafe you feel, how much headspace it all takes up, and how impossible it can feel to make calm and thoughtful choices when you're constantly on edge. And that's where the mental health piece really comes in, because if your brain and your nervous system are stuck in threat mode around money, it becomes much harder to do the things that actually help you to feel better and to move forward. So now let's talk about why your financial well-being matters. Money stress doesn't just live in your bank account. It lives in your body. Your brain is hardwired to treat anything that threatens your safety as a potential emergency. And in the world we live in now, where we're constantly talking about money, money has become one of the biggest symbols of safety. So when you're not sure how you're going to cover the bills, or you feel like you're always on the edge, or you're just bracing yourself for the next price rise, your brain doesn't see that as a budgeting issue. It sees it as a full-blown, we might not be safe here kind of thing, and it reacts accordingly. So when your brain senses a threat, it flips your nervous system into survival mode. You might have heard terms before like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and that's your body's built-in emergency system kicking in. So with financial anxiety, it can look a whole bunch of different ways. It could be racing thoughts, which is fight, constant hustle or a desire to overwork, that's the flight response. It could be going numb and avoiding everything, which is a freeze response, or people-pleasing around money and work because you're terrified of rocking the boat, which is a fawn response. So none of this is you being weak. This is your brain doing exactly what it's designed to do when it thinks that your safety is on the line. The problem is that your nervous system cannot tell the difference between I literally have no money for food this week versus I'm scared that I'll never get ahead and I feel out of control. To your brain, both of those feel like a threat. And then on top of all of that, there are the internal stories that you tell yourself about money, right? So if you grew up hearing things like, oh no, we can't afford that, or money doesn't grow on trees, or things like, don't be terrible with money, those narratives can become part of your identity as an adult. You might feel ashamed or guilty, or like you're somehow failing if you're struggling. but you're not, and you have nothing to be ashamed of. Shame is a really powerful silencer because it stops you from asking for help, talking openly, or even being honest with yourself about what's actually going on. And unfortunately, a lot of people would rather quietly drown in money stress than admit that they're not coping. Then there are all of the external pressures. We're living through a cost of living crisis in many parts of the world. Housing is expensive, groceries are expensive, utilities are expensive. Hell, even breathing feels expensive some days. And everything seems to keep on going up, except for wages. At the same time, you're being constantly bombarded with messages telling you to buy more, upgrade more, be more. Now, there's a really cruel mismatch going on here. You're being sold a lifestyle you cannot realistically afford in an economy that's getting harder and harder to survive in. And then you're told that if you're stressed, it's probably because you're bad with money, or you're not trying hard enough, or maybe you're having too much avocado on toast. No wonder your nervous system is screaming. It's like living in a pressure cooker and being told to just relax and manifest abundance while the gas is being turned up underneath you. There's also the toll on your everyday mental health that we need to consider, right? So constant money worry can make anxiety and depression significantly worse. It can reduce your ability to focus, and it can drain your motivation. It strains your relationships because you're a lot more irritable, more withdrawn, or more prone to arguments about spending. So here's one thing I really want you to remember. Money stress is not just about numbers. It's about how safe you feel. And here's another. If your brain thinks your survival is at stake, calm and rational decision-making will always come second. That's not you being lazy or bad with money. That's your nervous system doing its thing. And this is why financial anxiety can feel so overwhelming when you're barely holding it together. You're not just dealing with bills or bank balances. You're dealing with a brain in threat mode and a world that keeps on cranking up the pressure. That combination can leave you feeling trapped, out of control, and constantly bracing for impact. The good news, though, is that once you understand what's going on underneath the surface, you can start changing how you relate to money stress, even if your external situation doesn't just magically improve overnight. And we're going to talk about how to do that right after this quick ad break, because I've got bills to pay too. And welcome back. So now let's get into the how-to part of this episode, and let's talk about how to deal with money stress. All right, let's talk about how to go from feeling constantly on edge about money to creating a bit more calm and control. So we're going to go through 3 types of tips, a few immediate actions that you can use when your brain is screaming, then some quick actions to take over the next week or two, and then a couple of bigger picture changes to work on over time. So let's start with the immediate stuff for when money stress is like right up in your face. First, get the storm out of your head. Take 5 minutes to dump every single money worry that you have onto paper or into your notes app. Put down the bills, the can I afford this thoughts, the fears about the future. Don't second guess it, don't organize it, just get it out. Seeing all of that stuff in one place turns it all into a list that your brain can start to deal with instead of just swimming around in your head. And that alone can take the edge off. Next, give yourself 1 day without money doom scrolling. For the next 24 hours, no cost of living horror stories, no how I bought a house at 25 flex content, no you're failing if you're not investing like this videos, none of it. Your nervous system is already under pressure. Giving it a break from constant danger signals, which is what all that stuff is, will help it to calm down long enough for you to think clearly. Next, do one small thing you've been avoiding. Pick one tiny money task you've been putting off. Open a bill, check one account, reply to one email, and whatever it is, just do that. Avoidance keeps the fear feeling huge because your brain only knows that there's something bad lurking. So facing one thing shrinks it slightly, and it gives you a small hint of, yes, I can handle this, which is exactly what your nervous system needs. So now let's talk through quick actions you can take over the next week or two to create a bit more rhythm and structure for yourself. And first, it's the one that I mentioned in the opener. Do a 10-minute weekly money and mind reset. Every week, at the same time if you can, just sit down for 10 or so minutes. Start out with a few slow breaths, just to tell your body we're safe enough to look at this, and then quickly glance over your main accounts or bills. Choose one money task to do, and choose one kind thing for future you. I do this myself every Saturday, and it makes a real difference. This is not about trying to fix everything. It's about teaching your brain that money gets handled in a calm and contained way, not just in moments of panic. Next, decide on your non-negotiables. These are the things that you'll protect as much as humanly possible, even when money is tight. So that might be basics like food, housing, medication, electricity, and one genuinely important small joy that supports your mental health. Like, I don't know, a weekly coffee or a cheap streaming service that you use to switch off. In a cost of living crisis, your brain starts acting like everything is an emergency. But when you name your non-negotiables, you're saying, these are the foundations that help me function. It gives you a map to work from, so when you have to make hard choices, you're not always sacrificing your well-being first. Next, set specific money check times. Instead of constantly checking things, decide when you'll look at your accounts or your bills. Maybe it's once a day or even just a few times a week. And outside those times, don't look. Constant checking might feel like you're staying on top of things, but what it actually does is keeps your nervous system in a permanent state of something could possibly be wrong. Turning it into a scheduled task tells your brain, we have a plan and we'll look at it at this time. That predictability creates a bit more space because you're not half thinking about finances all day long. Okay, now we're going to zoom out to longer term changes, and these are things that can support you over the next few months and beyond. First, build emotional safety nets. So yes, emergency funds and savings matter if and when you can build them, but emotional safety is just as important. Now, that might look like having one or two people you can be brutally honest with about money stress, or a community space where people go and talk openly about their real life struggles. Or maybe it's working with a professional if you can access therapy or counseling. When you feel completely alone with money stress, your nervous system is more likely to tip into crisis. But when you know that you can say, I'm really struggling right now, and someone will hear you without judgment, your body relaxes a tiny bit. And that tiny bit often makes the difference between avoidance and taking action. If your situation is really dire or difficult, I would also recommend consulting with a financial counselor. Many offer their services free or at a very reduced rate, so it is worth looking into. Next, think first. There's something I've learned to repeat a lot in my own life. Every choice has a price, because it does. Every yes costs you something, whether it's money or time or energy or stress. Now, that doesn't mean that you never say yes to anything fun or unnecessary. It just means that you practice pausing before you make choices and just asking yourself, what is the price of this in terms of money, in energy, in time, and in stress? Maybe that purchase is worth it because it genuinely brings you joy or it makes life easier. But also, maybe it's not worth it. So the point here is not to shame yourself, it's to be conscious and intentional so that you can feel less like life is just happening to you. When you remember that every choice has a price of some sort, you're more likely to choose in ways that will protect your peace instead of just reacting to pressure or comparison. Next, set boundaries and stick to them. We live in a world where prices are going up and social feeds are full of people renovating their kitchens, going on fabulous overseas holidays, and buying things for themselves just because. And if you marinate in all of that all day long, then of course you're going to feel like you're behind. So, over time, start curating your environment. Unfollow accounts that make you feel like a failure. Mute constant content full of holes or unattainable luxury. Unsubscribe from sales emails that keep poking at your insecurities to try and get you to buy, because you cannot out-willpower an environment that is constantly telling you to spend more and be more. Protecting your attention like this is nervous system self-care. It lowers the background pressure so money stress isn't hijacking your mind quite as much. Think of it as turning down the volume on the world's expectations and opinions so you can actually hear your own needs. So you might be listening to all of this and thinking, that's a lot, Jeremy, and I'm exhausted already. And that's exactly why I want to repeat this. You are not meant to do everything I've just talked about. In fact, please don't. That's a shortcut to burnout. Instead, just pick one immediate thing and one quick or longer term action that feels doable for you over the next week. Whatever it is, keep it small and specific. Nothing changes if nothing changes, but you don't have to change everything all at once. Let me know in the comments what you're going to focus on first, and let's talk about it. So here's the main thing I want you to take away from all of this. You can't fix the cost of living, but you can change how your brain and body respond to money stress by using small, calm routines and making more conscious choices about where your time, energy, and money go. So, what's one simple change you can make today to help you feel a little less on edge when it comes to money? Not 5 changes, not a total life overhaul, just one small shift that gives you a little more breathing room. Because when you boil it all down, the cost of living might be out of your hands, but how you protect your peace is not. Each week I like to finish up by sharing a quote about the topic, and I encourage you to take a few moments to really reflect on it and consider what it means to you. This week's quote is by an unknown author, and it is, "Worrying does not take away tomorrow's troubles. It takes away today's peace." Let me repeat that. Worrying does not take away tomorrow's troubles. It takes away today's peace. All right, that's it for this week. If you'd like to support the show, my Patreon gets you early ad-free episodes and extras. It's linked below. Thank you very much for joining me today. Look after yourself and make a conscious effort to share positivity and kindness out into the world, because you get back what you put out. Take care and talk to you next time. Join me next week to talk about navigating the holidays, and check out my episode on desperation and overwhelm next. It's linked in the description. And follow or subscribe to never miss an episode. Let's Talk About Mental Health is an independent program Discover more at ltamh.com.